back, so we'll get it
All right.
on the mic.
Okay, taking the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, and I really love the idea of bionic or doing preventative personalized medicine and try to get ahead instead of like waiting later. But I guess my question around that general longevity area is human biology is very complex. There's definitely a lot of unknown why certain disease happen, why certain people get more prone to certain disease. So how and I love the idea of like using data and insights and be predictive about it, but how do you know what kind of signal you can choose to collect at the beginning? Because if thinking widely, there are just so many different signals you can pick from genetics, from like all the physiology, etc. So how do you cast a wide net enough to be able to say, hey, I can use those data as foundation moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So human biology is probabilistic. It's not deterministic. And so what does that mean? It means we actually, it's kind of funny, you think 2024, we're this advanced society, we have all this knowledge, we're doing all these amazing things with AI, but like our knowledge of exactly what's going on in the human body is still relatively primitive. And just kind of even if you look 10 years ago in terms of the state of the art, in terms of how we think the body works and what are the things that improve your chances for increased longevity or not, have changed quite a bit. And so the short answer is there is no perfect answer. It's not something that we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, primarily because there's so many different combinations of people, right? It's not like there's just one set of genes and one set of ways in which people's bodies function. And so my belief is that there's a couple of ways you could go. You could go the traditional healthcare way, which is we're going to do a little bit of testing once a year. And in my belief, I think that's like not very useful. Even with my testing, I get tested much more frequently, at least once a quarter, sometimes more. The rate at which some of the biomarkers, that is some of the things that change, is much higher than I think what a lot of people would suspect. You go get your test once a year, and then you go get it tested the next year, and you think, okay, well, let me just connect those lines. It goes like that, right? No. Actually, throughout the year, you'd be shocked at how much things are going on in your body that you aren't aware of. The dynamism of the human body is pretty significant. And so, I've seen that in my data where like the numbers are bouncing around. Sure, it might end up back there a year later, but during the year, based on a whole bunch of things, stress and diet and what I was doing, things were fluctuating significantly. So it almost kind of depended, when did you do that once a year test where maybe the thing would show up. So that's one way to do it, is to do the limited testing and hope for the best. The other is to collect as much data as you possibly can and rely on the best science we have today, knowing that it'll probably still evolve and change over time. And I kind of preface at the beginning, I'm a data guy. So I'm going to err more on the side of, I'd rather collect as much data as possible, and let's try to use that to be as informed as possible to make decisions versus, I just don't want to know, I don't want to see it, and I'll just go and hopefully things will work out for the best. And plenty of people are in that camp too, and I'm totally cool with that, because it is a little unsettling to know, well, all right, Robbie, maybe you suggest I do something, and how do you know that's going to make things better or worse? Again, all we have to go off of is the latest research in science. It's not to say that it's going to be perfect for everybody, but my belief is it's certainly better than the alternative.
This is paralleling something that I've got going on in a startup, so I'm trying to separate out what you said from what's other things going on in my head. But anyway, so you said that the doctors are not data oriented traditionally, right? So then you end up at the end of this flow of a whole bunch of data that has to be analyzed by a machine, but then presented to a doctor that has to then, the doctor's going to make the decisions with you what you want to have done, right? So are you having to have like trained special doctors to be able to handle, all these decisions that have to be made where, the traditional person is going to get the three things and then it's always the same three things. So like, is it a different kind of doctor? at the end of that process that you have to sit with?
So the way that we handle it is we have advisors for each area of focus. So we have, the head of cardiology at Duke is our heart health doctor. We have one of the heads of the sports medicine department at UNC as our main sports physiologist. And so we kind of go sort of, area focus at a time and find advisors that, especially on the preventative side, really understand what moves the needle to help people increase their health span. And then we bake that into the protocols that we use to then automate when data comes in. It makes determinations with that data based on the protocols we created. What does that mean? How does that translate into something that needs to be looked at or not? And then we have doctors that tend to be generalists, but they've been trained on these protocols as well, right? So they don't have all the understanding that the head of cardiology at Duke has, but understands enough, especially based on the reports that we generate, to kind of sanity check and make sure that what was produced is the right course of action.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you've also hired doctors who are believers in this new way of doing it. And that's, fundamental to the
that embrace wanting data. I often say that nowadays we need doctors to be data scientists. The problem is doctors aren't data scientists. They weren't trained to be data scientists. They don't even have the tools to be data scientists. It's unfair. But ideally, that's what I kind of wanted with my primary care doctor. Here, take my wearable data. Here, I want to collect more biomarkers. And he's like, I don't think you need all that. I'd rather have somebody that says, no, I'll take all the data you got. And again, but they've not been trained that way, so it's very difficult.
But are they gonna, I'm just thinking, compared to traditional, are they gonna end up with these 40 different things, and they're gonna have to go, oh my gosh, what do I focus on here? Or is the machine kind of saying, number one this, number two that, number three that, and then the rest we'll wait till next time? Or that's what I expect a doctor would do, but is the machine doing that part? Or?
So it tends to not be 40 things, because another way that we're different from, say, executive health or some of these other services where you go in and do a bunch of testing is, I went through one of these processes locally with a local concierge doctor. Went in half day of testing, did a bunch of different tests. Took 6 weeks to generate the report, but I went back after 6 weeks, and it was a 30-page report. And he spent an hour with me, and it was great. But I left the meeting, and I instantly forgot half of what he told me. And then the other half, then it's 30 pages of stuff, and I'm like, that's just too much. What am I going to do with 30 pages? Which one do I start with, right? And so for us, what we did was we broke up the process. We don't do all the testing. We have some people that say, just let me do all the testing now. It's like, we don't even let you do that. You only can, first we do what we call the baseline blood panel. And again, that kind of gives us a general overview of how everything's doing. But then after that, it's like, all right, you want to do body composition? All right, we call them modules. You just do them one at a time. And you don't go to the next one until you've completed the one you're on. Partly to avoid this notion that you get all this data in, you're like, there's just so much here. Where do I start? How do I prioritize? And making things more sequential. Again, that's why we call it a journey. We try to prep our members that this isn't something that you can spend a day on or a week on and you're good. If you want to take your health seriously, it takes some effort and time, and it's going to be, you have to be engaged with it. I'm not saying you got to be engaged with it constant, 24/7, 365. That's not realistic. I'm not even that way. There's times, there's weeks that go by that maybe travel or whatever, and I just don't feel like working out this week, or I'm going to have that bowl of ice cream I've been putting off, or whatever. There's times people come in and out of dealing with their health, but you got to come back to it eventually. You can't put it off for years. That's when you start to get in trouble.
We'll go John, Mike, and then I'll ask a wrap-up question, and then I assume you'll be around if you want to come up and ask you questions after that. So John, Mike, and then
Hey, thanks for being here. The question I have is your machine learning, is it proprietary to you, and where are you gathering your data from? I'm assuming with electronic medical records, there's a lot of de-identified information that's available. And I'm also thinking about, because I've used computer software in the financial industry and seen the 300-page financial report for that, and you've got the horsetail with the probabilistic determinants in there. So how do you gather that information, and how do you determine what other elements need to go into, I'm assuming it's a neural network type operation, to see if there's a correlation there? Because I'm assuming that would change all the time.
Yeah, so we built our own EHR. So we built our own electronic medical record. We tried to use some off-the-shelf ones, but because we need to do significant analysis on our data, none of them worked well in terms of getting all the data out. In many cases, it was cost prohibitive to even be able to pull out the data. Even if it was our own clinic, you know, they still kind of held the data hostage. So we built our own. And then we went down the path of creating our own clinic because we wanted to be in charge of saying, you know what, you're missing, we need this other kind of data. We can't rely on it having been done elsewhere because, again, most of the tests that we're talking about, people aren't getting from traditional health system. So we essentially fill in the gaps with the data by having you go out and do these other things. And then that way we can get the picture that we want to make the best decisions on treatment plans and how to, you know, fix whatever we see there. And in terms of the model, we're actually not building, at least yet, we're not creating our own model for Bionic. We're using off-the-shelf GPT-4, but we're doing it in a way, it's called a RAG architecture, which is we have our own sort of knowledge base that we've put together that has kind of all the protocols and the, you know, best practices and all of that we believe in. And then you use that as sort of the fact database. And then you use GPT as the reasoning.
The book, right?
Yeah, it's essentially you take outlive, and that's, you know, a lot of what, you know, you would want in this sort of fact database. And then you have GPT use that when it needs to come up with assessments or like to figure out what's important, what's not important, what to look for. And so it's this kind of hybrid architecture where you're relying on some of the foundational models because it's super expensive to build something that's that good nowadays for a small startup. But then you pair that with a knowledge base that you put together yourself.
And Mike had the last question.
You have a quick one after that?
I'll buy one.
Okay, got a lot of questions for you.
Hi. You've depressed me. Basically because I'm a failed entrepreneur. My problem was that I was very good technically, developing solutions, talking to people, getting the solutions. And at one stage, my company was about 40 people and doing a few million a year, but could never get myself organized with people who would actually move it forward. So I wish I'd heard you many years ago. But anyway, I've got a real question though. My understanding of machine learning is that you need to be able to tell the machine what's right and wrong. So that in the ideal world, what you need is the history of all sorts of people, and for it to be useful in any database you've got, a certain number of people got to die, because that's what you're trying to correlate performances that are services that correlate with people dying early, and the ones who are, like me, live to 80 plus. So how can you get that information? I know recently Duke came to me and offered me $25 for me to upload all my medical records. And was that anything to do with you guys?
No. And so first off, on the initial piece around being a failed entrepreneur, just so you know, the thing that's probably most disheartening to me as an entrepreneur is that how much luck and timing factor into it. And so there's a guy named Bill Gross that he started something called Idea Labs a long time ago, and they were an incubator of startups, and they had literally like hundreds of companies go through their system. He did this pretty famous TED Talk where he talked about, they looked at the top 100 companies that came out of their incubator, and what was the main reason that they were successful. And 40% of the time, they attributed it to luck or timing. I was like, 40%. So there's this thing out here called luck that, and I believe you make your own luck and all that, sure. But like, there's this thing out here that I largely don't have a lot of control over, timing especially, that has this really disproportionate impact on my ability to be successful as an entrepreneur. So anyway, I don't know if that helps at all, but like, it's not to be discounted that there are these forces beyond your control that are attributable to lots of startups that don't make it. So I wouldn't necessarily put it all on your shoulders, but And then as far as your other question, no, we're not involved with that Duke study. But again, this kind of goes, this is the other thing that kind of got me interested in the space is over the last 10 years, the amount of energy and time and research that has gone into starting to look at these longevity markers has been significant. And so actually there's lots of studies now on all different aspects of health. How do steps taken per day correlate to mortality? How does LDL and HDL cholesterol impact mortality? Just you name it, and there's probably been a study or significant studies that have shown that. And so that kind of all goes into this mixture that I mentioned before of like, what are the best practices now? There are definitely best practices related to if biomarkers are this way, then it means this, or it's a problem or not a problem.
Okay.
John, we'll get to both of you. I want to give the people a look at one. So we'll go to you, and then we'll go to you. We'll close out.
Thanks. Well, this is a great talk. Thanks for being here. I'm from the Bay Area as well. We can talk about 2009. I think I was one of the first companies that got funded at that time, and we had to give up a lot. And it's like, for the last few years, it's like, what, you got what for what? It's a pretty nice game. One of the great things about taking big swings and big problems like this is that you wind up making it and taking an inch, and you find 10 more problems and 20 more opportunities, and you have to decide the two that you're going to go tackle. So I'm curious, I thought it was a good punchline for this to talk about Bionic Health right now. What are the two, what is the big new problem we're expecting? What was the big, what's the big new unexpected opportunity that is actually going to show up on the light?
Yeah, so in our first year, we proved to ourselves that we can automate a doctor. The technology is not exactly there yet, but again, GPT-4 and the host of other models that are available now we're certainly, we can see where things are going, and within a couple years, it's going to be certainly doable. Now, that was a good thing that happened. One of the things that we learned along the way is that just because, for lack of a better word, robo-doctors, that is completely automated doctors, are going to be technically possible, that doesn't mean they're going to be coming to a clinic near you. And the reason for that's the FDA. And so the FDA, in order for there to be robo-doctors, or again, doctors that can, essentially you upload your labs and it gives you back instantly what you should do, or like what it found, and what treatment you should get. And like, here's a prescription. The FDA has to approve that technology, and they've not yet proven much in the AI space, and they have a huge backlog. As you can imagine, there's lots of companies that are developing AI solutions in healthcare, and not a lot have been approved by the FDA yet. And so one of the kind of interesting conundrums is that, again, we're going to be a couple years away from robo-doctors being a reality. You could argue maybe a better option in many cases than the traditional doctors. Certainly you could say that worldwide. The World Health Organization says that half of the world's population doesn't have access to high quality health care. And so they certainly would benefit from even like the best robo-doctor today. But there's also regulations in the United States, obviously it's much more strict than that. So that's going to be interesting to see. That's one of the reasons that we built our own clinic, is that there's a loophole that you can build AI solutions for your own purposes. You just can't sell them to other doctors. And so we'll see how that develops. If that loosens up, maybe we'll be able to provide that technology to other doctors. But for now, we're just building it for ourselves.
All right, final question back here.
Thanks. I actually have two, if that's okay. First question is, you mentioned earlier on that you are trying to raise funding right now, and you're running into a lot of roadblocks, and you're hearing lots of different answers from various VCs. Just curious about what kind of things you're hearing, what kind of roadblocks you're experiencing, and how you plan on navigating that. Second question is, I'm not familiar with the tech startup scene in the Triangle area, but just want to get your thoughts on what it's like to start a startup in this area versus like the Bay Area.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird time. So it's not So the way VCs work, they're kind of like entrepreneurs in that they have to raise money too, right? So a venture capital firm raises a round of funding, and that supports them making investments over a 3 to 5 year period, right? So they may go out and raise $50 million. I might go raise $5 million. They need to go raise $50 million. And then they invest that money over a period of time. Well, in high interest rates environments like now, and in the past few years, the M&A market, that is the mergers acquisitions market, which is how you oftentimes, make a return for a VC. Like when your company gets acquired, they get a return on their investment. Or if a company goes public, they get to sell their shares and they make a return. That's been really limited, and especially there's been a lot of big acquisitions that have gotten shut down by the government. And so it's not a very good environment right now for companies to get acquired, and interest rates are high. And so why does that matter? Well, if I'm going to go out and raise money and I'm saying, all right, I want this high net worth person to give me some money, and he's going to say, okay, well, how much can I expect to make out of this? And you're like, well, I don't know, maybe it'll be anywhere from, maybe it's 20%, but the risk is very high. I mean, it's like, who knows if we're going to make that? I mean, it could be lower than that. But if I could go out and put my money to work in bonds and make 5 to 7% with pretty much no risk, that's a much harder proposition, especially if you're telling me that mergers and acquisitions aren't really happening right now. And so what happens is, in the psyche of the VC, they're like, well, it's a hard time for me to raise money right now, so what do I need to do? I need to make this fund last as long as possible, which means don't make investments or make very few investments. Because again, there's there are some restrictions around how long they can do the investments, but they can definitely elongate it. And so what that means is now for entrepreneurs that are raising money, it's very difficult because you have to be pretty much in the bullseye for a VC to make an investment, because they're not wanting to make investments unless it's like a sure thing, or they feel like you're going to have a really good markup by the time you raise again, because when they are out raising, they're going to want to show you off to the people that are investing in them. Anyway, that may have been too much, too in depth on that point, but the short of it is, it's kind of a weird time. It's a weird mix that, at least in my experience, this is even harder than 2009 when we had the financial meltdown. That was a more shortened period, unless rates go down soon, and unless we start to see more IPOs happening, more acquisitions happening, it's going to continue to be hard, because you're going to start to see funds having problems. So if they have to go out and raise more money and they can't raise money, then those VC firms may shut down, and then there's less capital to be invested in startups. Okay, last question on the what's it like in the Triangle. So I am a co-GP in a local fund called the Tweener Fund. The Triangle Tweener Fund was started by Scott Wingo. Scott was one of the first people I talked to when I was thinking about leaving Cisco. He's been a mentor of mine for many years. He started this fund called the Tweener Fund a couple of years ago, and then I joined shortly after it started to help him out with it. And we're essentially an index fund for Triangle startups. What that means is we try to invest in all the startups we can that are Triangle based and above $1 million in revenue. That's kind of our easy way to say, well, you've gotten some traction. We don't do a ton of diligence. It's mostly meeting with me or Scott. Our check size isn't big, 50 to 100K typically is what it is. But we try to invest in all the startups we can that meet that criteria. And so in the last 2 years, we've invested in over 100 Triangle startups. There's about 300 that match that criteria, above $1 million in revenue or 10 or more employees in the Triangle. So we've invested in, about close to a third of all of those companies. And Scott and I will continue to do that. That's kind of my side hustle or hobby is helping entrepreneurs raise money. So, it's not the West Coast. I'd love to say that, we're making so much progress here in the Triangle, and it's like not that much harder than being in the West Coast, but having gone through the process right now and talking to West Coast VCs and hearing how they think about startups, it's still pretty different. It's at least easier to raise money. I won't always say that it's better to raise a lot more money. In fact, if you don't have to raise any money, that's the best situation to be in. And so the West Coast, the problem is maybe the money comes a little too easy. Then you got to spend it. You got to raise more money, and you get on this wheel that's hard to get off of. But anyway, happy to help get you connected. I mean, that's what me and Scott do is, new entrepreneurs, especially to move into the area, we want to help get them connected because we want the Triangle to be, one of the best places to start and grow a company.
Okay, last question from me. We've put you through the ringer today. Really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening and being a part of this conversation. A lot of great questions. You said earlier that being an entrepreneur is still the best job, despite all the challenges. Challenging time to raise money for entrepreneurs. Does AI make it the best time ever to be an entrepreneur? The scariest time ever to be an entrepreneur? Where does the state of AI technology fit into your framework of entrepreneurship generally?
Yeah, I think it's still the best. I mean, there's a trope going around now is there going to be $1 billion single person company started in the next 10 years, right? I don't know. That seems like, to me, so here's my quick analysis on the market. When we did Automated Insights, technology was still novel, and you could build stuff, and you could build it, and they will come. Because the market wasn't dominated. Internet was still immature in some ways in terms of solutions. Now we have the opposite problem. Pretty much anything you could think of could be built, can be built, will be built. The big problem is reaching the audience. 2010, you could reach the audience if you had it, because there was nobody out there. You didn't need a big megaphone, because there was just so few people that were competing with you. Now it's the opposite. There's so many people out there with solutions. It's now all about distribution, unfortunately. You can have the best technology. And again, this hurts me because I'm a technologist. I'm not a distribution guy. I'm not a marketing person.
Ew.
Hey. But,
Finally, it's my time to shine.
That's right. And so I do think the future is in distribution. I don't think it's going to be in technology. You got to have a good way to reach the market, or you're not going to be successful. And so that's the thing that, to me, I'm less worried about AI necessarily, as something for entrepreneurs to fear. I think it does make it easier to build solutions. But to be honest, that's not the main issue now. The main issue is reaching customers. And on that point, so bionichealth.com, use Bionic15 at checkout. You get 15% off. Check it out. You can easily reach me. I'm robbie.allen@bionichealth.com. If you have any questions about what the program looks like or any of that, feel free to let me know. Bionic15, 15% off.
Did you say bionichealth.com?
No, I said bionichealth.com.
Oh, great. Well, people should check that out. Robbie Allen, everybody. Thanks to 79 West and Innovate UNC.
And thanks to James.
Hey.
Appreciate it.
Any final logistical announcements or anything? Or are we? Okay, great. Hey, Gene, would you take our picture and